How are you two this morning?
Huh. This is interesting. Oh, I know I don't have insert my video. There's my problem. Okay. Pardon me? Yes, because I put up different ones, but I haven't put up any new ones since for a week, a little over a week. Oh, okay. 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 So we're going to put in on, I don't know what page you have in your workbook, because my workbook is 40. Yeah. And we left off at, we're at number 8 there. So you want to read that for us, please, Robin?
Sure, I can start. Ha apostolos genoskai tus dekaius kai tas dekaias. And I translated that the apostle knows the righteous men and women.
Okay.
You have any complaints with that?
No. You shortened it up. Can I see your version just in case they change this a little bit? I need to check these out. Okay, no. Okay, so that is the way. I just was seeing, because you said the righteous men and women, because we have the term, the adjective righteous twice.
Right, so I probably should say the righteous men and the righteous women. For
expanded translation.
Sure.
But I understand what you did. Okay, so go ahead.
Okay, so compare and contrast dekaius and dekaias, and I said that dekaius is masculine plural and dekaias is feminine plural, and both are in the accusative case.
Very good.
Does genoskai express progressive or perfected action? Explain. I said progressive because it's in the present tense, but I actually don't know.
I would be inclined to say progressive, that it's an ongoing situation that he's in. The apostles, an ongoing situation of knowing these people right now. So I would agree. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and read the next one. Number 9, Hi Himerai Panerai I sin, which is the days are evil. Okay, so now this is one that we were getting the question. I don't know if I think this was yesterday afternoon. I saw this question coming up. So in what position is the adjective panerai in the phrase Hi Himerai Panerai? It is in what we call the predicative position. So operating as the predicate or the final part here of the sentence. And it expresses, it is modifying the noun by saying it is this thing. So it's what it is doing. It's further explaining it, but it's also giving us a sentence. So then we have this. This was the big question. Is the verb of being eisen necessary in the sentence? It's not necessary in the sentence. Okay. Oh, okay. All of a sudden I heard something. I was wondering what it was. The verb eisen is not necessary. It's not necessary because when we have a noun and an adjective in the predicate, and the adjective is in the predicative position, it is as though saying we supply the to be verb here, the copulative. We translate it simply, the day is evil, even with it if we don't have that. And so the answer is why or why not? Why is it necessary? Well, we just answered that because it's.
You just can't take it out of your Bible.
No, it's there. It's there for a reason. They put it in there.
You don't know what it is, though.
What?
You're just
Maybe
saying,
just-
no, there's not a reason.
Maybe just for clarity. Okay. That's why it is. So,
That doesn't make sense.
okay. Number 10, then you want to go ahead and read that one again.
Me? Oh,
Yes, please.
10. Tus necrus hatheas egairai tais escatais hemerais.
Oh, wow. I have a completely different sentence in my. Okay. This is it. They really have changed the textbook in some places here. So,
So I said that this one is saying, the God, although that's awkward English, raises the dead in the last days.
okay.
What is the subject of a gairai? On what do you base your answer? I said that the subject is the dead, tus necrus, because it is in the accusative case. That is what I base my answer on.
Okay.
Parse egairai. It is a verb in the present active indicative tense. The subject is he. Sorry, I'll just finish page 40 there for you. Third person singular. The stem is egair. And the lexical form is egairo. Oh, there is one more question. Is hemerais dative, locative, or instrumental? What is the significance of the case? I said that it's locative, and locative is the case of location.
Okay. Okay. I'm reading these on this end today. So number 11 then. Hopefully I have the same one. Did yours begin with agathos?
Nope. Yes. Nope.
Number 11. Oh, okay. Number 11 is the one that I have for number 10. They've taken, let me just check this here. And number 13 is my 11. Okay, so they've added this. Okay, so pistos de hathias. And then notice, as we've already talked about, de is a post-positive conjunction. That means it never occurs in the first place. We translate it in English first place, so it'd be now or but the God is faithful, okay? But we always translate it first, but it occurs second or third word of a sentence in Greek. And this kind of comes back to the other question we were having. Why is there no need for a verb in this sentence? Because pistos does not have a definite article with it, and therefore it is functioning in the predicative sense of an adjective, and that indicates that we supply a to be verb. We do that because it's odd English to not do that. For Greeks, as we already said, the Greek at the time of the New Testament was written, it was not uncommon for them to just not use the to be verb in situations like this. So they would just put the subject together with an adjective statement about it, and they would just drop that link, what we call a linking verb or a to be verb. So we don't do that in English much. We do it occasionally, but not often. It's rare.
So, Tim, in that sentence and then in the one that we just did, theos is preceded by a definite article, but it's super awkward English to say the God.
Yeah.
But they're obviously trying to indicate a specific God. So are we to assume that it's our God, that it's the God of the Bible?
Yes, but there's more to it than that. Not always. Most of the time in the New Testament, when you have God or Lord used with a definite article, it's referring to a specific person of the Godhead. So there's sometimes that God occurs without the definite article, and it's referring to, shall we say, the Trinity in general. All persons. And I put this up. No, I erased it already. I put the one up the other from 1 John, and it doesn't have an adjective. It's two nouns, but it's over there. It starts off with theos, but without a definite article. Theos was being the Word. And literally in Greek, we'd say the Word was being God or deity. So it's not saying that he was being a specific person. It's saying that that person, the Word, was being this God quality that is true of the Father, true of the Spirit. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. The other thing that the definite article does for us in front of theos is it helps us know that theos is functioning as the subject. So in English, we translate that first, and we put pistos in the predicate position in this sentence, and which is the same thing that we have in John 1:1. We have that in that last phrase, except it's using nouns, not an adjective. Okay. Okay, so number 11, right? We're down to number 11.
12.
Oh, 12 in yours. Pardon me? Okay, we did 11 in yours. So, okay,
Right.
so go ahead and do your next one. The one that-
Ha huias tu anthropo ekai dekaius ferain ten alethian tus anthropus. Sorry, I have a lot of things written in here. It's hard to see what I actually translated it to. Because I think I translated Decaius wrong. So what I have is the Son of Man has righteousness to carry the truth to men.
You translated it righteousness.
Well, because that's what word makes sense. But righteous, I mean, that the word is righteous, right?
Right.
Or just.
Furthermore, it's not only righteous, but what number is that?
What number?
Yes.
Oh, it's plural. You're right.
It's plural. So I would end up translating it that the Son of Man has righteous ones to carry
Oh, okay.
truth to men. In other words, he has righteous people that we would say, that are commissioned to carry the word to men.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because yeah, dikaios is a righteous thing, a righteous person. Dikaiosune is righteousness. So he has righteous ones to carry.
So the book translates it, the Son of Man has righteousness to bear the truth to the men.
I would disagree. I do not think that that's a good way to handle that, because there's not a reason to translate righteousness, dikaios, a plural adjective, to translate that.
Right. So the Son of Man has righteous ones to carry the truth to the men or to the people. I'm not sure that makes sense anyway, but
Well, it's in other words, he's not having just anybody carry the truth to people. He is having righteous ones carry the truth to people.
okay. What factors confirm that huios is the subject of ekai? I said huios is the nominative singular, making it the subject of the singular verb. Yeah, ekai.
Yes.
You good with that?
Yeah.
Is anthropo genitive or ablative in case? How can you be sure? I said genitive. It modifies or describes huios.
Yes.
What part of speech is ferine? What is the significance of this part of speech? Infinitive. It's part verb, part noun.
Yes.
That is all.
Oh, that's the last question. Okay. See, I do not have that one in my book. So, okay, move on to what's the next sentence you have? Because I notice I have the rest of these, but in different order. What?
Agathos, ha, adelphos,
There we
kai, didaskai.
Okay. Yeah.
You want me to just finish reading it?
Go right ahead. Yeah.
Tus pistus te ecclesia.
And
Shall I?
remember it's agathos.
Yeah, that's what I said.
To me, it sounded like Hagos. I wasn't listening to it.
Agathos.
Okay.
Agathos. Would you like me to translate it as well?
Go right ahead.
Okay. The brother is good, and he teaches or is teaching the faithful in the church.
Okay.
Are the adjectives agathos and pistus attributive, predicate, or substantive? On what do you base your answer? I said agathos is predicative. It does not have a definite article preceding it.
Correct.
And pistus is substantive. There's a definite article, but no noun to modify.
Okay.
What is the subject of didaskai? The faithful is the subject of didaskai.
No.
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 The church, the faithful in the church. No.
So how do you're looking for a subject for a verb?
Oh, the subject. I'm sorry. The brother is the subject.
Okay.
I was answering the object. And why is the position of the article important in translating the adjective? Because it determines the usage of the adjective. Tells us if it's subjunctive, predicative, or attributive.
Okay. Yes. My ears don't work well. I thought you said subjunctive, but substantive is what you were saying.
I did say subjunctive, but I meant substantive.
Okay, substantive. Okay.
There's a lot of words floating around in my head right now, Tim.
Okay. What sentence do you have next? I just need to kind of know. I'll go over it here. Adikaios, okay. Adikaios mathetes graphai, Elaine parabolaine ole te ecclesia, which I would say then is the righteous disciple writes another parable. Now this is tricky. This, I have to say, I have this one circled because this is one that, well, let me ask a question because they don't have a question on this down below in mine. If you read well, we have whole, the church. So he writes a parable, I would say, to the church. But halein, or hale, excuse me, in this case, is what type of adjective in this case? Is it attributive, substantive, predicative?
Well, the way I translated the sentence, I made it attributive, but there is no definite article, which was confusing because it also doesn't really make sense any other way.
I agree. So this would be one of those that I have questions on, in terms of.
And I can't remember if I looked at what the book wanted us to translate it to or not.
Yeah, I would translate it as he writes a parable to the whole church.
Yeah.
It's not in a normal attributive position. Okay.
Is it in a normal anything position?
It's in a predicative position. But then
Right. So
the righteous disciple writes another parable, and now, so you'd have to, if you translated it dative, you'd say for or to the church as whole. That
right.
is really odd. Sometimes English translations of Greek do come across kind of bizarre. If you handled it in a locative sense, a parable in the church as whole, that probably makes even less sense in that regard. And if we translated it instrumentally, we would say another parable by means of the church as whole. So none of those really work to translate hale in a predicative position.
Right.
So it's what they're doing is you're putting you in the position that when you're going to read, you're going to read. Let's put it this way: there are people that are really great scholars in terms of that they understand language and linguistics far better than I do. But when they read, as an example, when they read Peter, they say, yeah, we can tell Peter knew how to write, but he doesn't write with any of the polish that you might get from Paul. They also, one of the things that they say is that when you read 2 Timothy, they say 2 Timothy is not like the rest of Paul's letters. So a lot of them reject that Paul wrote. A lot of scholars think Paul did not write 2 Timothy, even though, which means we should take it out of our Bible, because then it's has to be a false book because the person writing it claims to be Paul. So that would make the letter false to begin with. But what they're not understanding is Paul is at the end of his life, and so as he's writing you don't write everything the same all the time. You might be in a very stressful situation. In a stressful situation, you may write things differently than you might write when you have times to sit down and think and compose different things. And I think I made this comment in Bible study last night that the Holy Spirit makes sure that everything that these people write is what he wants said.
Right.
He doesn't come in and override their style. He doesn't override their personality. It still comes out when you read Paul. I mean, when I read Hebrews, to me, it reads like Paul. And there are good scholars that admit that, although a lot of them try to say, oh, no, Paul couldn't have written this for various reasons. And so the reason I say all that is that when you have situations like this, you're going to have books like the Gospel of Mark. I've been working on the Gospel of Mark lately. That the Greek is what scholars would say, it's kind of rough Greek. It's not very polished, and it doesn't necessarily always follow all the rules of Greek that we would expect it to follow. But it's not like Mark probably went to school and learned Greek grammar in the way that we understand Greek. We think of Greek grammar or learning English grammar. And so they learn the language, they learn to write it, and they put this stuff down. It's not like they're certainly not illiterate. They're just not schooled in the sense that we would think of it. And so they're going to write things sometimes maybe in the way that they might tend to kind of speak, in the same way that when you go downtown and you talk with people here, people aren't speaking with precise English grammar.
Right.
You just use grammar and you go, you just ended that sentence in a preposition.
Right.
Stop doing that. And so Mark writes that way sometimes, and Peter in 2 Peter also kind of has some different character. So all of that long explanation is the fact that you're going to, when you come to the New Testament, you're going to come to situations that when you translate it, you're going to have to work at it, and you're going to go, the only way that this really makes sense is to translate it this way. So I'm going to do this until maybe something comes along that I understand better why it should be translated another way. And I've got that. I have notes in my Bible where I have written marks in there, translating it some way, and then I come back a few years later and I'm like, oh, in light of this and this translation is wrong the way I have this here. So, and let's put it this way, it's one of the reasons you have a lot of different English translations and they don't all agree, because translators, it's not like the rules of grammar are so hard and fast that translators are stuck in a situation where, oh, it always has to be this.
Right.
Anyway, so question A then, explain the agreement of elements of the attributive phrase hadikaios mathetes. The agreement of elements. Well, number one, it's in the attributive position because it has a definite article as connected with the noun. Secondly, it agrees in gender, because it is, mathetes is a first declension masculine noun. So it has the first declension masculine ending. It occurs in the same case, and it occurs in the same numbers. So there's an agreement of those elements. B is ecclesia, dative, locative, or instrumental, and what's the function of the case. And as I translated it, I would say to the church. He is writing a parable to the church or for the church. Either one of those are dative meanings. So the function of the dative case is the case of reception. So you're sending something to them and they receive it, or you're doing it for them and they receive the benefit of it. Okay. One more to get through here today. Number 13.
It's number 15 in our book.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I gotta just let you do the next one. Sorry.
Ha heteros anthropos ekai ton monon kalan huion. The other man has the only good son. What is the difference between allos and heteros? Allos is another of the same kind. Heteros is another of a different kind. Heteros anthropos could be just as well stated in Greek as ha anthropos, ha heteros.
Or you also could say ha heteros and then supply anthropos.
Oh, okay.
If the context bears it out about what you're talking, then you could just say ha heteros and you would understand that you're talking about another man.
Okay.
If it would be ambiguous, you wouldn't do that. You'd have to add man, anthropos here for clarity in terms of what heteros is, to which heteros is referring.
Gotcha. What factors identify huion as accusative singular masculine? I said the ending and the lexical form.
Okay.
The lexical form would help us to identify that it's masculine, and the ending is an accusative ending for the singular masculine.
Okay. Does your next sentence begin with piste?
It does.
Okay. So piste, he didake, kai hanamas dikaias, which would be the teaching is Oh, okay, yeah, the teaching is faithful and the word is righteous.
The word.
Or the law, excuse me, the law is righteous. Okay, brain glitch. Okay, so the teaching is faithful and the law is righteous. So how can you be certain that piste and dikaios modify didache and namas? That's not the question you have?
It is, but they've phrased it differently.
Oh, okay, probably phrased it better. Okay. Number one, didache is first declension, masculine, nominative, singular, and our piste, in this case, from our adjective pistos, is a feminine, also like didache, first declension, nominative, singular. So it's connected to didache. Secondly, with dikaios and namas, it'd be the same thing, except we're talking about second declension, masculine, nominative, singular, both of them. So those are the things that help us tie those two. Now, in what position are these adjectives in relationship to their respective nouns? I would say they're both predicative, because neither one of them have a definite article. So, oh, did I? No, they're feminine. Didache and piste. I made a mistake. Didache and piste. If I said masculine, I was wrong. They're feminine, first declension, noun, and adjective. Okay, I apologize if I said that they were feminine. Again,
so then you said they were both predicative?
both predicative, because both neither of the adjectives, let's put it that way, has a definite article with it. So that's why I translated it. The teaching is faithful and the law is righteous.
You're right, and I agree with you, but that's not what I wrote.
Oh, okay. Now we're going to look at namas, locate namas, part of speech, noun.
Okay, we'll take care of it in a minute. I'm in my class.
Its case is nominative. Its number is singular. Its use in the sentence is that it is a subject. Its gender is masculine. Its lexical form is exactly what you see there, namas, and its declension is second. Okay. Next sentence.
Okay. Hekastas psalmon ekai didakein ekai apocalypsin ekai glosson ekai. This was a really hard one for me. So each or every one has a hymn, has a teaching, has a revelation, has a tongue. That's the end.
Of course, did your notebook mark note that read out of 1 Corinthians 14?
Uh-huh.
Okay, good.
Okay, so is hekastas in the attributive, predicative, or substantive use in this sentence? I said substantive.
Correct.
And what is the function? It's the subject.
Okay.
I felt like this note in B was not helpful because it doesn't tell me why they would do that. But notice the 4 occurrences of Akai and then the 3 of Hagios in the other sentence, and this is paranomasia. But why would they do that?
Because it's kind of a way, it's kind of a very, I'm trying to think, we have modern examples of doing this where we're saying, each one of you wants to play a game, wants to read a book, in other words, it's like saying, you all have something you want to do. And so rather kind of tersely, and this is kind of what Paul's doing, he's kind of being terse with them, almost a little bit kind of frustrated with the Corinthians, going, you guys aren't being very orderly over at church. You guys, it's kind of out of order over there. Because everybody comes in, they all have something they want to do. And nobody seems to want to cooperate in getting it done in an orderly manner. So so you're supplying, and we understand that we're supplying hekastos really every time in there in our minds. We're understanding each one has a psalm. And then again, we would say, filling in the blank by ellipsis, each one has a teaching. Each one has a revelation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of expressing some terseness, I would say, on the part of Paul, and maybe a little bit of a frustrated terseness. That's the way I would understand what he's doing.
Okay. So then when I looked at it in my English translation of my Bible, it doesn't put the has in there every time. It just says each one has a hymn, a teaching, a revelation, and a tongue.
Right.
So
they're shortening it up for the sense of that. They're trying to bring out in English that terseness.
Okay.
A little bit more, I would say.
All right. And then the last. Go ahead.
There's a difference here than what we had over in sentence 3, where we have Hagios, it's the Lord God Almighty. There's a difference there in what they're saying than what's happening in verse 15. Because over there, they're talking about God, and there's theological and interpretive difference. What? Oh, yes, I have 50. Yeah, I've got to pull out my other workbook off my shelf that I have. Over in number 3, Hagios, there is kind of theological and interpretive, as a theological interpretive question is Hagios, is that repeated 3 times to express the Trinity? Is that why that happens? Because that comes out of Isaiah? Or is it, as some people would say, if you were a Hebrew and you really wanted to say something, you would say 3 times, you would repeat a thing 3 times to really say very holy. That's a rendering. In fact, Hebrew does that a lot, where it takes the same word, puts one in an infinitive and one in an imperfect, and it puts the 2 verbs together back to back, and it's the same verb, just in 2 different forms to say, really going to do this. So that's the question with Hagios over there. Is that a Hebraism? I tend to think that it's looking at the idea of the Trinity. So I think there's something different being expressed there, as they're asking you to compare that to the reason he's using ekai 4 times here to single out each one of these people, or all the individuals in the church. I hope that made some sense. It's rambling. Okay, so next question there.
The next question is just another note.
Oh, it is, yes. Just noted that apocalypsin is an accusative singular feminine third declension, which we haven't got to those yet. So
Right.
But they introduced us to apocalypsis at the beginning of this so that they could include this verse. Okay, and the last one then, which I believe this is mine then. So it's hoi, kakoi, anthropoi, legusin, heteron, euangelion, which would be the evil man, or the evil men, excuse me, plural, the evil men they speak, and again, this is kind of that a similar thing we had, a different gospel. See, there's something we haven't got to yet that we'll have to point out here with that last phrase, heteron euangelion. So how can you be sure that the adjective kakoi is in the attributive use in the phrase hoi kakoi? And number one, it is in this. It has the same gender, the same gender. It is the same number. It is the same case as anthropoi, and it sits between the definite article and the noun. So it's hoi kakoi anthropoi. Why is the movable noun expected in the phrase legusin heteron instead of legusi? Because legusi would end in a vowel, heteron begins with a vowel, and so it supposedly provides a smoother translation. And then number C, what is the function of euangelion in this sentence?
And it's a plural.
Legusi is a plural. Yes,
I do not follow.
that to add the noun at the end. Thank you. What is the function of euangelion in this sentence? It is functioning as the object. So they're speaking a gospel. They're not just speaking anything, they're speaking specifically a gospel. Now, we haven't got to this yet. I don't know when they introduced this. I didn't go ahead and look in our textbook to see what lesson we get to. But when you omit, when we talked a little bit about the definite article, because there are some special cases, when you omit a definite article in Greek, we usually say we supply an indefinite article, which is not always accurate, doesn't always express what is being said. And let me give you an example that we talked about the other day from 1 John, where we have okay, so here's a place where theos, in the first place where it occurs, that this is the last phrase. There's three clauses, not phrase, three clauses in 1 John, or in John 1:1, excuse me. So here's our verb aim. This is an imperfect form of the word estin, which we've just been introduced to it. Because this has a definite article, this is the subject, and this is in the predicative position. Just like we've learned in this chapter about adjectives. But this one actually uses the verb. And there's a reason for that in this case, why that verb is important. But this, we would translate this in the word was God. Now, the New World Translation, which is done by Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower Society, they translate this verse, and it's out in the beginning, it's and I didn't do this right. This is not theos. I did that wrong. It's
It was only mildly confusing.
Yeah, there we go. It says, and the word was, just keep this short now, was, and this is what the New World Translation does, they say was a God. Now this actually here, number one, it's an inaccurate translation. But number two, translating this a God creates other problems that the Watchtower Society is trying to be honoring to God. But God in the Old Testament makes it very clear there are no other gods. And yet their translation of this actually creates a contradiction, because now it makes the word a God. So they create another problem. But it shouldn't be translated a God. It's just the word was God. And when you leave the definite article off, usually you are emphasizing here, let's put this in a different color just so we know it's not part of the translation. We're talking about quality. So we're saying the word was the quality of being God, or the word had all the character of what it meant to be God. And therefore, if you have in this sentence, you have two statements in here. The first statement being that the word was existing in a quality of beginning. The second sentence telling us that the word was facing, in the second sentence, the God. So we have another person who's God, and the word is facing that. The last time where there's not a definite article, it says, and the word was God. You would go back to the previous phrase or previous clause, and you would say, whatever was true of that one that he was facing is now also true of him in terms of what this is saying. He was being a quality of God. Now, the reason that that's important in this is that when you leave the definite article off in Greek, you oftentimes are referring to quality. It's something that we don't bring out in English very well. It's something that sometimes I'm lazy when I'm teaching, and so it's easier just to kind of throw an indefinite article in, but it doesn't always give absolutely the right sense. So this is the way I would translate this, maybe for clarity, without knowing a context, just having this sentence by itself. The evil men, they speak a different kind of gospel, is the way I would say it. So I am putting an indefinite article in front of a, but I'm using the word kind here to emphasize it's not as just that these people have a specific gospel that they're talking about. It's just that they have different quality of gospel, different quality of what they pass off as a good news. And therefore, we don't have a definite article at all in any way. So in that last place, heteros then, let's just ask you to throw this out. Is heteros attributive? In light of that information, is it attributive, substantive, or predicative with regard to gospel?
I would say attributive.
Yes. Yes. That's the way we would translate it. So hopefully this wasn't confusing what I'm just trying to say. I'm just trying to say when you leave the definite article off, you're laying its emphasis on quality. And that's what's happening, is that these evil men are speaking a different quality of gospel, something that's different than what the apostles had spoken, different than what Paul had presented.
I mean, so if we were just based on our word meanings, right? Heteron means another. We know that it means another of a different kind, but you could just say they're speaking another gospel,
right?
And then provide the of a different kind,
right? And I think if you're gonna, because we do this in English all the time, you all should be familiar with this by now, with even the basic Greek that you have. If you look at your English Bibles, you realize that sometimes it takes us 3 or 4 words to translate one Greek word.
Right.
To get the sense of what's going on. And so personally, for me, I think I would honestly translate this, if I were doing a translation, as I would say a different kind of gospel, just to bring that sense out, so that an English reader would know that he's talking about something different than, and I didn't bring a Greek text with me today, but this is out of 2 Corinthians. Similarly, this is out of 2 Corinthians. Well, I can pull it up here so everybody can see this. So let me find it. And then we'll share the screen. 2 Corinthians. I believe we want 2 Corinthians 11. Okay, because there's 2 interesting things that happen in 2 Corinthians 11 here. So let me pull this up and share this. 2 Corinthians 11, Paul is concerned for the Corinthians because they've got these people that we're in 2 Corinthians 11 and we're going to go to verse 4. He's afraid that these people are misleading some of the Corinthians. And then he says, pull up verse 4 in the Greek, for if on the one hand, the ones coming, and we have another Jesus. Now this is allos. They proclaim, kerusai, they proclaim a similar Jesus. So they don't come and just present just a completely altogether bizarre kind of Jesus. The Jesus they present looks a lot like the Jesus we have in the Bible. So he uses allos here, which is important. I mean, false teachers don't always come and present a doctrine that obviously is so plainly bizarre that everybody goes, oh, no, no. They present things that actually have some similarities. That's why Christians get caught and buy into this stuff. So here, whom, but Paul says, notice what Paul says. It's similar, but whom not did we, this word keruso, it's the same verb here. It's just in a past tense, shall we say it, aorist tense. Paul says, we did not proclaim. In other words, we never proclaimed this similar Jesus. Then he goes on, or you have received a spirit, a different one. And so now they're actually, and I believe this has to do with prophecy and revelation is what he's referring to when he's talking about a different spirit in this regard. And a good example of that would be 1 John 4. He says to discern the spirits. So they're actually welcoming information from a different spirit, not from the Holy Spirit, which is crazy that Christians would do that. But Paul says that in 1 Timothy 4, that people are going to pay attention to these doctrines of demons and from things from these other spirits. And Christians are going to do that, and that's a problem. And then he says, which you did not receive. You did not receive. So you received this, but you did not receive. This is not the spirit that you actually got. And then, or a gospel, a different one. This is where they're kind of basing this. I understand this statement in verse 16. They're playing off of this idea, or a different gospel, which you did not. This word, this is lambano, which you know. This is a verb you don't know. Dekomai means to welcome a thing. He says, or a different gospel. So he's contrasting the Holy Spirit to the spirits that these false apostles are giving information or revelation from. He's contrasting the gospel to the gospel that they did welcome or receive. But he says that the Jesus up here is similar in this way. And notice in all of these here, spirit does not have a definite article, neither does heteros in this case. The same thing, he doesn't put a definite article with Jesus, which seems odd, which doesn't seem odd to us, except there's a lot of times that Jesus has a definite article in Greek. Same thing with gospel and heteros, neither one of them have a definite article. So I don't know if this is helpful, but the reason I would just translate this, I think if you're going to teach this accurately, I think you need to help people understand that these people are, when it says they preach, notice the English over here, they have another Jesus from one. Or if you receive, now notice this is the Net Bible, the Net Bible does translate it different spirit and a different gospel. So the Net Bible actually is I think, expressing this better. I'm going to go to the ESV. I don't know how they're going to handle this. They have another, and they have different. Okay, that's good. So the ESV is trying to communicate the fact that we have something different going on. New American Standard, which is my favorite, doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. That they have another Jesus, different spirit. Okay, so they do a good job with that. Okay, so we do have English translations that are representing this, and I think in explaining this to people, you need to tell them you're going to have false teachers that are going to come along and they're going to present a Jesus we didn't proclaim, but it seems very similar. And I think that that's one of the things that sometimes Christians struggle with Mormonism is Mormon Jesus, until you really get down to real fine, not even fine details, but just really get them to clarify their point. Their Jesus can sound a lot like the Jesus of the Bible. And tell you, nail them down on terminology and find out that they mean something different than the terminology. So this is a good place to understand and bring out when you're teaching this, the significance of allos versus heteros. because this is altogether a different spirit here giving this revelation and an altogether different gospel. Anyway, so that's trying to explain a little bit of why we have a statement here. They've made up a sentence, but I believe it's based on this verse here, where they have heteron euangelion that they're announcing. Okay, I don't know. Hopefully that didn't muddy the water. Hopefully that maybe was helpful in clarifying.
No, it's good.
Those two adjectives. And this situation where we don't have a definition. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I will try, as soon as I get back upstairs to my office, I will try to post the test online. But one thing, I have to read through all the tests one more time to make sure I don't have any typos in my question, what I'm asking. So essentially, like I said, it's a take-home test. So take as long as you need to work on it. When we do it, I'm just going to go through the answers and with you, like we've been doing in the book. Try to see if you can answer the questions without going to the book. If you feel like you need to go to the book to answer it, my advice to you would be to get a different color pen and write those answers in a different color, or underline them or mark them in some way so you know which ones you answered from what you've learned and which ones you had to go and look stuff up in. I think it's good to learn to do stuff to try to answer these things without a textbook. But I will tell you, a key part of education is not always just learning to have all the facts memorized up here, but knowing where to go get help with those facts. Because if I just knew all this, I wouldn't own a bunch of grammars. I probably have 20 grammars on my shelf. And yesterday when these questions were coming up, I sat for at least a half hour or longer reading through all those grammars on verbless clauses, just trying to see if I could find anybody that would add any details. In fact, and I've done this before because several of these grammars on in the front page, I always write notes for myself, and I've got the page numbers written on verbless clauses because I've looked at this before, and so I'd flip them open to see if I'd ever look, because sometimes it's a little hard to track down in some of them. And some of them, they just mention that they're verbless clauses, but they don't give any clarity about why sometimes you have a verb and sometimes you don't in those like that. So maybe they don't even know exactly why that's the case. Anyway, all that to say is I use stuff like that regularly when I'm studying. And so I don't have a problem with other people doing that, but I do think it's good to try to work through it yourself first, really hard, before you try to turn to any other resources. So mark those on the test for yourself. You're not turning these into me. These tests are to help you see what you're learning